I can't hear you. Can't hear you. Hang on. Hang on, Tommy. Hang on. Try talking now. Oh my God! Now I can hear you. Jesus, it was much better before. I'm not live. We need to start, right? Oh, now it is live. Okay. Are people in the room then? Oh, okay. Hey, it's Evan Grant, everybody. I'm live. This is how I do TV or YouTube. I am never real sure when I'm live. I think that goes for real life as well. What I don't have right now are questions. So I'm looking to see if we have any questions in the room. If we don't, let me just run through all the particulars here. I'm Evan Grant with the Dallas Morning News and DallasNews.com, your friendly Rangers insider. I am back in the home office where you can see lots of tributes to my work, my family. We are going to talk about the Rangers today. We will talk about anything you want on the Rangers for the next 30, 45 minutes. Um, I will mention very quickly that if you have been a fan of these YouTube Lives, to please like the channel, subscribe to the channel, comment on the archives, whatever you want, because this is supposed to be much more about fan and reader engagement or viewer engagement than about just me prattling on. So, adjusting the camera here, I'm looking at producer Tommy, who is also my boss. Tommy, I'm not seeing the question. They're not showing up in here. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. Okay, I had to click on the public chat, everybody. I'm confused. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. What a disaster this has been for me to start this off with. But we do have questions, and let's get to them. Gallagher Champ is saying the timing sucks, but hey, Evan, I appreciate these. We'll catch the replay. Listen, quick comment on that. We've been experimenting with different times and different days of the week just to see what fits best for everybody. I don't know if this is something you'd want to do on your lunch hour. I don't know if this is something you want to do at the end of the day. I don't know how is best for you guys to participate. Please, if you've got any thoughts on what works for you, maybe we can even run a poll somehow somewhere um, on what works best. We'll try and make that happen because it's all about as much as we can get from you guys. And here comes my good buddy Bill Flanagan. Haven't seen Bill in a while in real life, but he's always here. Bill wants to know the Rangers as a team and individually have a lot to prove this season. Is that a good thing or are expectations too high? Um, there is a lot to prove, Bill, and I think we've kind of been over this general topic a couple times already, but I think there's a lot of things that have to go right for the Rangers to really achieve uh, championship caliber play. We've talked about the offense. We've talked about the number of spots in the bullpen that have to really be determined. Have to hope for another really strong pitching performance from the starting rotation, uh, and on and on. Now we can break down the individual hitters if you want, but yeah, there's a number of things that have to go right. I don't think they all have to go right, but I think that the Rangers need to have some things that are realistic turn in their favor. I think they need to see Josh Jung track back upwards. I think they need to see Jake Berger have the kind of year that he showed in 2024 when he was with Miami and Skip Schumacher, and over the last 6 weeks of the 2025 season. They certainly need Jock Peterson to doesn't have to return to a 930 OPS guy, but he does need to return to being a productive hitter. Um, they need to get more out of right field than they did last year. I think that's realistic because I do believe Brandon Nimmo is an offensive upgrade over Adolis Garcia. I think Adolis is a better defender in right field than Brandon is, but I also think the Rangers have some ability to maybe, use Brandon. They hopefully get a lead. Maybe they bring in somebody as a defensive replacement for innings 7, 8, and 9 if it's all about run prevention. But I do think he's an offensive upgrade there. I think if you look back at the last few years, Josh Smith is an offensive upgrade over Marcus Semien. And so that's a realistic expectation to hope that those things, to believe that that will be better. I certainly believe that Danny Jansen is a significant upgrade offensively over Jonah Heim. So those are all realistic things that can happen. Evan Carter has got to prove himself uh, that he's healthy first, and so far so good. That he can hit left-handers, which is a bigger question that won't get answered into the season, and on and on. So, I think that expectations for this club are that they are a playoff team. I think internal expectations are that they are a playoff team. Are they the favorites to win the AL West? No, Seattle is. Um, and I think even the Rangers would acknowledge that on paper, Seattle certainly has both last year behind it, a really good nucleus, and it will be an uphill battle to catch Seattle. The Rangers feel they're capable of doing it, but it is an uphill battle. Um, and so I guess the question for me is the Rangers feel like they're probably an 86, 87 win team right now. Can they get to 90 or 91? Um, on the positive side, I think it's possible. But I also think that if they are an 85 win team in their projections, it's also possible that if things don't go right offensively, they're more like a 78 or 80 win team. So there's a big range there, and that's why they play 162, so we can get a better feel for where in that kind of 12-game win element the Rangers will fall. All right, I went too far. I went too far. I'm sorry, Bill. I didn't mean to bore you. Carson is up. Carson, what does Cam Colley need to do to make the team? He seems like a perfect fit as the new super utility piece. Carson, I don't see Cam Colley making the team out of camp. He's going to be a good player. I think the Rangers have seen real progress for Cam. But Ezekiel Duran is going to be this team's super utility player going into the season. I think the bigger question is going to be, is there a way for the Rangers to carry both Michael Hellman and Alejandro Osuna? Um, I think you will see Sam Haggerty. He has played some second base during spring training. I think you'll see Sam Haggerty play some second base during the regular season against some left-handed pitchers. You'll see Duran play shortstop on days that Corey Seager's off. You'll see Duran play first base, perhaps occasionally for Jake Berger, though Jock Peterson has worked out at first base and played some at first base already. But I think the bigger question for the Rangers is going to be the extra outfielders. Right now, I think that they're going to go with one pure utility infielder, and that'll be Duran. And they also have the ability, look, if they want to play Duran at second base one day, um, and they want to give Josh Jung a day off, Josh Smith can play third base. Or Ezekiel Duran could play third and Josh play second. You want to give Corey Seager a day off? I think Duran and Josh Smith are equally as good shortstops. But my point is that if you need to, you can move Josh around a little bit too, depending on what your lineup situation is that day or your injury situation is, to accommodate other players. So I think that Cam has positioned himself really well. I think this is another year for him to take a big step forward. Look, right now with Sebastian Walcott out for at least 4 months, dealing with his internal brace surgery, and Caden Scarborough, the pitcher, dealing with a melanoma that he had surgically repaired, which shouldn't delay him for the start of the season, or removed, I should say. It shouldn't delay him for the start of the season, but obviously it's a situation that's going to have to be monitored. So far, so good for him. But my point is that right now, Cam Colley is the best position player playing among the Rangers minor league prospects. I think he's the number 3 prospect overall in the system in my mind. And I think with Walcott out, and with, in all likelihood, the Rangers being very careful with with Scarborough. I think that Cam Cauley is the best position player. I don't know why I'm stumbling over my words because I'm monitoring questions and also trying to answer. I'm a terrible multitasker. You can ask producer slash boss Tommy. Michael. Michael wants to know, is a wild card asking too much? I don't think so, Michael. I mean, I think this team, based on the number of wins that they have internal projections for, I think this team expects to compete for a wild card. And I think, if they are truly an 85 or 86 win team, that puts them right there on the cusp of the wild card. 87 got Seattle into the playoffs. 86 for Houston finished them a game out of the playoffs, I think, right? I think they finished the game out. So I do think it puts them very much in the picture. And if this team makes progress offensively, stays healthy in the rotation, and can find the pieces internally to kind of hold down the bullpen, certainly they could add some pieces at the trade deadline, probably in the bullpen, um, and make themselves a real contender, whether it's for the wild card or the division race. So I do think they're very much a wild card contender going into the season, providing everybody is healthy. But that's why we play the games. But I don't think you're asking too much to think that this team could potentially compete for a wild card. This is not a stretch. It's not a rebuilding year. They haven't torn things down. They've got a really good starting rotation. They've obviously got a franchise caliber player in Corey Seager. They've got a star in the making in Wyatt Langford. And there are some things that are going in the right direction with the big league team. I just think it all hinges, as we said, on will Jung and Berger bounce back? Will Carter be able to be a full time player? And will Jock Peterson, produce? So if those things happen, this team's going to be in some kind of race, whether it's for the division or the wild card. I can't speak, but they will be in some kind of race. Joe Bob. Joe Bob, predictions state the Rangers rank number 15 or so in MLB. Do you think these predictions are underestimating the power of a good clubhouse with Skip, Schumacher, and the youth taking the next step in their careers? Well, look, Joe Bob, last year the Rangers were 81 and 81. The definition of mid, the mid point, of 30 teams is 15th. So I think that's all very accurate based on last year. But I do think, we've talked mostly about stuff on the field. I do think that the new manager certainly can be an asset, and I think the culture, if you get full buy-in, can be an asset. But the club's also got to perform. So I think for those things to really be assets, you've got to have guys perform. Nobody talks about great chemistry in a losing clubhouse. I do think that Skip is the right guy for this situation at this time. I do think that he has shown a more energetic approach to spring training than Bruce Bochy did. That's not to criticize Bochy's managerial ability or his style. I think they're just two different styles. And I think when you decide that you're going to make a change at manager or you need to go in a different direction, the pendulum always swings. I use the stupid hand motion all the time when I talk about this, but the pendulum swings from one side to the other. And so you had a guy who was more laid back and a guy who was more willing to just let the clubhouse run on its own. And now you've got a guy who is a little bit more active and wanting to take, I think, a more proactive approach to the clubhouse culture. I still think that when this clubhouse functions, it's going to come down to players policing themselves, players handling their own leadership things. But I think that what the manager can do is create an environment where everybody feels empowered to talk. And I think he's tried to do that from day one. So, um, yeah. Charles Tucker wants to know, is it possible a non roster makes the opening day roster? Well, I think it's very possible that Mark Canna makes the opening day roster as one of the um, the extra bats on the backside. He can also play some first base. He can play the outfield. He can be a right-handed DH against left-handers if you want him to. The Rangers signed him with the intent of him making the team. Canna's coming off of a bad year, there's no doubt, and the Rangers got him because he fit into a budget that just had no real room for making, I don't even want to say a splash, but a ripple, because Miguel Andujar signed for $4 million. I think Austin Hayes, another guy the Rangers had interest in, signed for $5 million. So it's not like um, there weren't other bats to be had, but the Rangers just didn't have money to approach it. So I do think on the on the position player side, yeah, I think it's real possible that that Mark Canha does. I think he'd probably be the only non-roster guy on the position player side. I think there's certainly a scenario. I don't have my 40-man roster in front of me or the spring invites, but I do think there's a scenario where Cal Quantrill could make the staff. Um, let's say that the Rangers really determine that they're committed to Jacob Latz being in the bullpen, particularly in April when the Rangers have to come out of the gate fast and when they're going to need, you know, some piggyback opportunities for pitchers who will be on pitch counts. If the Rangers decide that that's the way they want to go, and if Kamar Rocker doesn't convince them that he's ready for the rotation, I think Cal Quantrill could be an option in that rotation. Um, so right now, the intent is for Kamar to make this team, um, and he's had two solid starts, but it's early. Last year after two starts, I felt like he had pretty much disqualified himself for contention. This year, he certainly hasn't done anything to take himself out of contention. I do think Jake Latz's first start was pristine. It was 2 innings, 26 pitches, 20 strikes, 7 of 9 or 6 of 8 first pitch strikes. So, I mean, Jake did everything that he needed to do in his first start. He'll get his second start later this week. But that is a situation I think will be played out over the course of over spring. And just to mention, Cal Quantrill is going to go to the WBC with Canada. I don't know that Canada makes it out of the first round, but I expect he'll get at least one start there. So he'll be away from the team for just a little bit. Don't think that impacts his ability to make this team, but I do think he will be out of camp for about a week at least. We've got questions piling in or coming in very fast. Has Jacob Junis pitched yet this spring? Is he hurt? I don't believe Junis has pitched in an A game yet. And there are a number of the relievers. Chris Martin is the first that comes to mind. And look, even in the rotation, Jacob deGrom hasn't started an A game yet. There are some of these veteran guys that the Rangers are just media sessions about injury situations, and Jacob's name has never come up. I just want to make sure I give you the right information, so I'm going to go and double check my spring stats here, just to make sure that he has not pitched. So while I continue to multitask, talk amongst yourselves for about 7 seconds, depending on how fast my computer decides to operate here. But on first look, I don't see that Jacob Junis has pitched in an A game. And I would expect, like Chris Martin, that'll happen next week. Right now is a good opportunity for the Rangers to look at some of these young guys who are trying to kind of jockey for position to either be a last man in the bullpen or to be a first option if the Rangers need somebody early in the season. Because look, they're going to have at least one guy in that bullpen that will have minor league options available. And if they need to shuffle guys around, they're going to want to have somebody else that they feel confident in that they can bring up, whether it's, because a guy pitched a heavy workload and they need a couple extra days off, or whether, you get an injury, or whether a guy's ineffective. So there is some jockeying going on between Gavin Collier, Ryan Lobus and Eric Loomis. I get their first names mixed up. It may be Eric Lobus and Ryan Loomis for all I know. I'm sorry about that, Lobus and Loomis families, but I bring you together all the time, so your names have run together. And Robbie Alstrom, left-hander, I think that he's also opened some eyes. But right now, you know, as long as we're just talking about the bullpen here and some of these guys, I do want to point out that the Rule 5 pick, Carter Baumler, has really been impressive in camp. I had a couple of scouts reach out to me after his last outing 2 days ago and were just raving about him. So that's a guy that, you can't option him to the minors if he's on your big league roster. This is a challenge with a Rule 5 pick. He's got to be on the active roster all season or on the IL and active for 90 days. You can't option him, so he wouldn't fit into that optionable category. So you'd have to keep him and kind of meet out his usage, but it's optimistic the way the guy has pitched to this point. So um, that's that. Kathy. Kathy wants to know, it's early, but how is Seager's health? Do you think he can go better than the 102 games he played in 25? Look, the last 2 years, Corey has not been durable. He's only played 150 games in one of the 4 years he's been with the Rangers, and having him more available is certainly something the Rangers are stressing. Had a little bit of soreness. The Rangers are holding him out. I know online I've seen some comments because the Rangers have held out Higashioka for a day or two. They've held out Seager. Um, some other guys they've scratched. At this point in time, there's been no indication that any of these injuries are strain or significant or that they'll miss significant time. Like last year when Wyatt Langford strained an oblique early in camp, we were made aware of that. These have been cautious things to try and prevent guys from overdoing it, overexerting themselves early in camp, and creating a problem for themselves. And with these veterans, I think it's just like with the pitchers. I think it's very smart to just kind of let them ease in a little bit. There are certain guys who want to go hard. Nathan Eovaldi has wanted to go hard, pitch the first spring exhibition, and he's gone hard every time out. Well, both times out. I'm sorry, I'm getting carried away. But the other guys, they're going to work slowly to allow them to get in because the goal with this team, and as important as the first month of the season is, and I can't stress how important those first 40 games are because look, they open the season at Philadelphia, a playoff team. They come home, they play Cincinnati, a playoff team. They play Seattle at home, a playoff team. They go to the Dodgers, two-time world champions. They go to Seattle, playoff team. They come home after a 9-game series, play Pittsburgh and the Athletics, and then they have the Yankees, Detroit, and the Yankees playoff teams. 27 of their first 40 games are against teams that made the 2025 playoffs. And so the Rangers are going to need to come out with their best team and have their best ability to get off to a hot start. And so if they're taking a couple of at bats away from guys early in March or late in February, I don't think that's a concern at this point. Let's see. What do we got? Chris. What is the most likely midseason upgrade the team will make? Obvious choice is closure is bullpen piece. Chris, I mean, I think you answered the question for yourself, right? Every year, the last 3 years, the Rangers have added some kind of bullpen piece at the deadline. In 23, there were a couple of starters, obviously, in Scherzer and Jordan Montgomery, but they added a bullpen piece. 24, they added, what's his name, from Eastbound and Down, the left-hander, Andrew Chafin. Last year, they added Danny Coulomb and Phil Maton. God, it's so hard to think of these names just like off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I feel like a blathering idiot. Uh, So that's obviously been a place where they have looked to fortify. It's a place where every contender looks to fortify. I do think that if the Rangers, barring barring Jake Latz moving into the closer role and really knocking that down, um, I do think the Rangers will have a need for a closer at the deadline. They'll need a more reliable closer situation. Um, so that's the obvious place. I think you could, if things don't go well at a particular position and the Rangers still find themselves in the hunt, you could potentially, maybe they try and add a second baseman if Josh Smith doesn't perform well. Or maybe they try to add a third baseman if Josh Young doesn't perform well. I but that's asking a lot at that point in time. I just think that right now, as we sit here, the biggest possibility of a midseason upgrade is going to be in the bullpen. Richard, Richard, I got to put my glasses on because you're 68 and I'm 60, and I can't read very much anymore. I'm 68. If I was running spring training, the pace would be like a slog. Um, is there any hint of a Patrick Corbin signing yet? No, there's been no hint of a Corbin signing. And I also think that, Corbin's going to be in a position, whether it's with the Rangers or someone else, that just like he was last year, the Rangers signed him when Cody Bradford and John Gray went down late in spring. There's been one or two pitching injuries around the big leagues already, but I would think that you get to mid-spring, somebody's going to lose another starter, and Patrick Corbin will be their 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 play. If that doesn't happen, certainly I think the Rangers would be welcome to bringing him in to pitch in the minor leagues, start the season, and have him in reserve as an insurance policy. I don't know if Patrick at age 36 or 37 really would entertain that, but certainly I think that would be a possibility on the Rangers front. Um, but I do think that he played it well last year to get himself an opportunity to start by sitting out until somebody had an injury. It required a low base salary, but he made almost doubled his salary of $3 million with incentive bonuses. He's reliable. He's durable. He's left-handed. There's a lot of things to continue to like about Corbin. I just don't think that the Rangers right now are in a position where they're going to add a starting pitcher just yet. So we'll see if they, if they incur an injury. Um, but that would be the only scenario in which I really see it. I think financially, for the time being, they are about tapped out. I think their CBT payroll is going to come in at about 205 million, which is a nearly 20% reduction from where they ended last year. Really big reduction in payroll. Their cash out payroll will be about 185. The other 20 million is for the pre-arb bonus pool and benefits slash insurance. So their payout to players is right at about 185 million projected right now. Let's see. Last season, this is Jonah or John. John. I saw an H there, so I thought it was Jonah. I'm sorry. Last season, Chris Martin was very good, but kept getting hurt. Now he's a year older. Why would we expect his health to be any better this season? Look, it's a great question, John. Uh, what I will say is, I think a couple of those injuries, the arm issue was a little bit troublesome because he felt it, came back, felt it again, and it just kind of lingered there. But there was also, I think, a calf injury in there that he tried to push through and aggravated it. Um, he's he's a very effective pitcher when he's healthy. He's had trouble staying on the mound and available for more than 40 or 50 games. So um, I think the Rangers go into it with the idea that they'll get everything that they can out of Chris Martin. I don't think that they expect him to be a 70-game reliever. Uh, I don't think they expect him to be a 60-game reliever. But yeah, I mean, he's still effective when he's healthy. The question is, can he stay healthy? And look, I can't predict that. I think He went into this offseason, wanted to contemplate some things about whether or not he wanted to continue to pitch. Um, Determined that he did. The Rangers wanted him to come back, uh, and he has, along with Ryan Brazier, who is here on a minor league deal. They were pitching. They were throwing partners up in Wichita Falls through every day, and so we haven't seen Chris Martin in a game yet. Won't see him probably until March 5th, 10th, somewhere in there. He'll probably pitch about 5 times in spring training, I would think. But yeah, keeping him healthy is going to be managing workload, figuring out, how, whether you can go to him back to back days, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the Rangers will have a plan in place for that. I just wish I could give you a better answer on why would we expect his health to be any better. Hopefully he doesn't have the second muscle injury that he had last year, and he's available for more like 55 or 60 games. Best I can give you. Larry, does McIver make the team as a third catcher? I love Willie McIver because I love using McIver puns. I don't know if anybody caught my little pun and observations last week when he turned 2-0-2 counts into walks. And I said, handy Willie McIver made something out of nothing, turning 2-0-2 counts into walks. See, that's where we're going back to Richard Dean Anderson and all that fun and games from the 80s and 90s because we're old dudes and this is how we entertain ourselves and torment our children. And thank you for putting up with me. But no, I don't think he makes the team as a third catcher. I think he will be the everyday catcher in Round Rock, and he will be available on first need for a call up if there's an injury, if Kyle Higashioka needs, 5 or 6 days off, you bring Willie McIver up. And there may be periods where the Rangers do carry 3 catchers on the active roster, but I don't think they'll go into the season with a third catcher planning to carry him all year. Um, I think the only way that that would happen, I think the only route to that is maybe you get an injury to Peterson or to Canna or to somebody who would figure into the DH slot, and you start thinking about using Higashioka more at DH. And so then you need what amounts to really a second catcher. But I don't, other than that, other than injury, and you have to plan for contingencies. But I don't think the Rangers are planning for Willie McIver to make the big league team out of camp. I do know that they've been real impressed with the way he goes about his work. Such a baseball term, the way he goes about his work, the way he plays the game, and how encouraging and how much control he takes from behind the plate. But he's got to hit, and if he doesn't hit, then he's a great option as a backup catcher when somebody's hurt. But that's about it. And to carry him as a third catcher, the Rangers are going to need that extra bat, that spot for pinch hits, for outfield play, maybe even some infield play. So I don't see that happening. Chris is back for round 2. Does Josh Jung have a short leash? I remember some impatience with his approach, things like that. Um, I don't know the level of short leash that Josh has. I do think that this is a prove it year for Josh. He's in his first year of arbitration. 24, he was hurt. 25 was a real down year. Rangers weren't happy with his approach at the plate. Josh wasn't happy with his approach at the plate. And so this is really a prove it year for him because as you go into your second year of arbitration, salary does really start to creep up. And you will have had, I've used this analogy before. You look at what the Rangers did this offseason with Marcus Semien, Jonah Heim, and Adolis Garcia. 3 guys who had sub 700 OPSs for back-to-back years. With each guy, they gave them a second year to prove themselves. And after that, they moved on. And so I think you can certainly apply that to both Jung and Berger, that if they don't take steps forward offensively, significant steps, because these guys need to be well above 700 OPS range. Josh needs to be in the 725 to 750 area at a minimum, and Jake needs to be above 750. So if those guys aren't there, I do think this club very possibly moves on. But to have a short leash, I think he's gonna get some runway here, especially with Cody Freeman out. I think there was some thought in the Rangers clubhouse that, or in their offices, that maybe Cody could push Josh a little bit at third base. But Cody's not going to be playing for most of spring with his stress reaction in his back. So it's going to take it takes some level of competition out, and that probably will last into the season. But it's important for Josh to get off to a good start, because your question about a short leash, here's the deal: if he doesn't get off to a good start, then all of a sudden we will be asking questions about, well, how short is the leash? What does Josh have to do to keep his job? And so forth and so on. And last year, all of that stuff really ate at Josh. I mean, his performance ate at him. I think the criticism ate at him a little bit. And he got into a spiral where he was chasing results. And that's the one thing the Rangers want him to guard against. They do want results, but they want him to be chasing a process, not the results. And if they see him going down that bad path again, in their minds, they may, I don't know. If this team gets buried in March and in April and May, and Josh is, hitting 220, maybe they do look at Ezekiel Duran or Cody Freeman at third base for a longer period. But at this point in time, I don't think they're planning for that. I'm falling back on this stuff, but yeah, I don't think they're I don't think it's a question where, like Leody Taveras last year, had about 3 weeks to prove himself, and he didn't, and that was it. I think Josh will probably get a little bit longer of a look before the Rangers make a final decision. Cy. I'm gonna go with Cy. Um, and maybe those are just your initials. And dude, I'm butchering it. I don't know. I'm sorry. If this team fails to meet expectations again, is there a scenario that CY decides to blow it up and go into full rebuild? Yeah, I do. I think that if this team struggles and they get buried, and he sees value in trading Corey Seager before he reaches 10-5 rights, which would come at the end of this year, if Nathan Eovaldi and Jacob deGrom are healthy, um, and the Rangers can potentially get value from there, I think there's an opportunity for the Rangers to go to kickstart a rebuild, and I think they would look at trading some pieces, but only if they're out of it. I mean, if they're around 500 at the deadline, I still think Chris Jung is gonna see that as a reason to continue to compete. But this is a guy who does not like rebuilding, does not like the concept of rebuilding, doesn't want to rebuild. He knows it may become unnecessary, and I think that it's a reality if this team doesn't do well. He's changed managers after two subpar seasons. He's moved out some players after two subpar seasons, and I think at some point in time you start to say, well, maybe, and I know I got in trouble with Ranger fans when I said that 2023 is looking more and more like a fluke. I'm sorry that word is so offensive, but it is by definition of a fluke. They did get hot at the right time. They were a good team and they were world champions, and I'm not taking that away. But if you win a World Series and you have 8 non-winning seasons around it, pretty much that World Series season is going to be considered a fluke. Does not mean it wasn't a hard earned and well deserved World Series championship, but the bottom line is it wasn't a real window of contention. And so if it's time to move on from that, I think Chris will do that. I think one thing you've seen from Chris Jung since he took over in 2022, or the second half of 2022, is he doesn't dilly dally around. I mean, he makes decisions and moves. He is decisive, and if he feels it's necessary to change the makeup of this club, he will act on that, and he will act decisively. And so I think when you talk about a quote unquote rebuild, I think you look at him potentially trading all the pieces of which he can get real value to accelerate the ability to get back into a window of contention, because the last thing he wants to do is an elongated period where the Rangers have to wait for something to happen. I think there's some challenges to it. I think there would be some challenges to rebuilding, especially with how thin the minor league system is right now. But you've got some pieces that you could trade to really restock that minor league system and give yourself some young everyday players. Charles just offers a comment. Love the MacIver pun myself. Are there any other players who have pun potential? Jake Berger is always, a good pun opportunity. I saw, you know, I saw from one of my friends, New York Mets writer Laura Albanese, who mentioned that the Mets are having their Star Wars bobblehead in May, and I forget who they've pegged it to, but usually it's pegged to a player, and the player is kind of in the form of a Star Wars character, and the Rangers did this one time with uh, Elvis uh, Landris Calrissian, I think is how they played it. The Mets could have gone with Bobichette for Bo Bichette, but they chose somebody else, and so shame on the Mets and their pun team. Um, I haven't looked into a lot of, to be honest, I haven't looked into a lot of puns. If you get, let's say you get Jacob Junis on this team, and you've got Jacob Latz, Jacob Degrom, Jake Berger, Jacob Junis. Am I missing any other Jakes? I mean, you could have a major league record for Jakes, and so certainly there's there's some kind of Jake play that we could get involved with. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. Berger, Smith, Peterson, Seager, Higashioka, Jansen. I'm sorry, I'm coming up short on this, but we'll work. If you've got suggestions, send them on to me here at egrant@dallasnews.com, or just put them in the comments on this YouTube chat. We're getting close to the end here anyway. We've got a couple more questions, and then I'm going to get out of here. Um, Steve, Steve Duran didn't hit it all last year. Outside of Freeman, is there anyone else that could fill in for Jung if he gets hurt? Look, I mean, Duran didn't hit last year, um, but he's the guy right now, and Freeman's the other guy. And so to an earlier question, could Cam Cauley be on the opening day roster? No. Could Cam Cauley figure in sometime this year? Yeah, perhaps. But I mean, I think those are the options right now. Is it's Freeman or Duran, and again, maybe you look at, I don't know. This is just moving bodies around, but if you take Josh Smith and move him to third, then you're just moving Duran or Cody Freeman or somebody to second. So I mean, that's just moving the shuffling bodies. It's not a new name. Uh, so I think, yeah, those are your two options right now at third base. Not great. Um, I don't want to say not great. I just there's not a lot of hitting experience there. Duran hasn't hit for 2 years. Cody, I don't think the Rangers look at him as a real offensive first player. I think they would hope that he'd be about a 700, about a league average OPS guy, but they don't expect him to be a 20 or 25 home run player if he was an everyday player. So, you're not going to go get, you're not going to see somebody explode onto the scene. That might have been Walcott if he was healthy. But Sebastian probably won't play and only as a DH until August or September. Uh, would be an option next year. I think that Sebastian Walcott could end up at third base very much in 27, uh, if we have a 27 season, which read my column on labor that ran in this morning's Dallas Morning News and is online at dallasnews.com. If you want to get up to speed on labor, I know you'll probably want to stab your eyes out after reading my suggestions on how to fix labor, but it's there and it's available for you. But maybe Walcott would be an option at third base in 27 if the Rangers decide to move on from Young. 26, no, that won't happen. Um, Larry, Larry wants to know, what is the role of the bullpen catcher? Is that a coaching position? Not really, but it's not a coaching position, but it's part of the staff. It's part of the sports staff. Last year's bullpen catcher, Chase Casale, who's the brother of the former big league catcher Kurt Casale, has now moved into an analyst role for the team. So I mean, it's an apprenticeship position in a lot of ways, and there's certainly some coaching elements that go into it because they're catching pitchers and they can give pitchers some feedback in the bullpen, but it's not technically part of the coaching staff. Um, but it does serve as an apprenticeship, and as we said, Chase is moving into a scouting and analyst department and will be part of the club. and they've added a different bullpen catcher. So um, if you're looking for a career in bullpen catchers, I will mention one bullpen catcher of particular note. I don't know if I'm supposed to do this or not, but our fine Metro columnist slash editorial page columnist, Robert Wolonsky's son, Harry, has made a career of bullpen catching. He is going to be the Marlins, one of the Marlins bullpen catchers this year after serving as the University of Texas's bullpen catcher during his time on the 40 acres. So congratulations to Harry, Marlins first bullpen catcher this year. All right, we're going to wrap it up here. Richard, of course, says that Jake's Burgers needs to be a sponsor of the team, and maybe this podcast or maybe this live. Who knows? We'll go with it. Jake's, if you're listening, hit us up. Always like a good burger and a good burger house sponsorship. Um, Very quickly, once again, a Carter Baumler making the opening day roster. I think right now I'd answer in the affirmative. I think the Rangers are very impressed with what they've seen. But as Skip Schumacher has said every day when we ask him questions about the roster, uh, it's February 27th. There's a long month. Baumler hasn't pitched in back-to-back games yet. He hasn't really faced guys, hasn't faced a lot of big league hitters. I'd have to go back and look at his couple of outings to see if he faced any established big league hitters in those. But he's been pitching later in games, so he's been facing mostly minor league call-ups. So there's plenty of time to really figure that out. But first impressions have been yes, and the Rangers drafted him with the intent of keeping him on the big league roster. So it would have to go sideways for him to not make the roster. All right, last question of the day from Charles Tucker. Can we have Oddibe McDowell teach some players the drag bunt? His were beautiful. And bunting has become such a lost art that I think many people may look at something called the drag bunt and think it's going to be people in women's clothes, and that is not what the drag bunt is. It's bunting for a base hit, mostly by a left-handed hitter, almost always by a left-handed hitter, up the first base line. I think Josh Smith does a good job of that. I think Josh had 3 bunt hits last year. He's a good bunt hitter. I think Evan Carter can do that. I think they'd like Evan Carter to do that. But the drag bunt's not coming back as a real offensive weapon. They just want guys getting on base, however they need to. Walks, line drives, base hits, take a pitch off the elbow if you need to, whatever. They want guys getting on base. All right. I think that is going to do it for today. Did anything else come in here, Tommy, while we were doing this? No, but you put some links up for my affordable burgers list that just ran yesterday online. 5 great affordable burgers in Dallas under $10. Be sure to check that out. Of course, Tommy didn't put in here my labor column. He didn't put the link to that. But my labor column is on dallasnews.com. I also, if you didn't see my Jake Latz story from earlier this week about Jake's bid to make the starting rotation, hopefully you'll give that a read. I'm really impressed with how Jake has kind of maintained his vision through a pretty circuitous route to the big leagues from high school all the way to the big leagues. He's really been patient and driven in this, and he deserves the opportunity to win this job. Whether it fits for the Rangers best or not, I don't know. But he certainly deserves the opportunity he's getting right now. That'll do it for now. I'll just remind you guys, please, if you're still here or if you've listened all the way to the end on archives, send me questions at egrant@dallasnews.com. Give this YouTube a like. Subscribe if you don't already subscribe to the Rangers channel, the Dallas Morning News' Rangers channel. Listen to the Rangers podcast with John Blake and I. This past week we had Benji Gill, Team Mexico's manager, and next week we will have Team USA's WBC manager and former Ranger, also Mark DeRosa, as our guest as we continue to go through that. The Sports Day Insider podcast is also available with me, Kevin Sherrington, and one of our staffers to discuss sports in around DFW. So that's everything from here. Really appreciate everybody participating. Uh, you're a great audience. You've been really supportive, and hopefully we can continue to do these things and you find them productive. But until next week,